In medieval Bohemia, there was a castle so creepy it was nicknamed the Gateway to Hell, and in 1297, its evil got a taste of power when King Wenceslas III left his infant son in the care of two servants and headed off on a hunting trip. You'd think that would be pretty easy, right? But these were no ordinary servants. These were sorcerers, and they had plans for their royal charge. Here's the sinister story of how they turned a king's son into a demon. Our tale begins in the late Middle Ages, a time when people believed that anything could happen in the dead of night. Wandering witches, ghosts, and other creatures of darkness stalked the land, looking for unsuspecting victims to terrorize or kill. For extra protection, many people wore small bags of holy water around their neck or kept holy relics like crosses tucked into their clothes. They even went so far as to ward off evil spirits by placing religious symbols above their doorways. The castle of Houska, however, was different. Rather than acting as a place of refuge, this fortress was allegedly crawling with demons. It had all begun centuries earlier when a group of Satanists built a pagan temple on the site. Some say it was here that Jesus Christ himself encountered the devil, who challenged him to build a tower even higher than the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Christ accepted the challenge, but before Lucifer could complete his structure, angels came down from heaven and demolished it. They then threw the stones into the nearby river, which miraculously dried up upon contact. Legend said that these stones were later used to construct Houska Castle, and they retained some of their otherworldly properties. It wasn't long before people reported strange happenings at the castle. They saw ghostly apparitions wandering through the halls, heard disembodied screams echoing in the courtyard, and felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over them whenever they stepped inside. Soon, Houska became known as the Gateway to Hell, and even the most intrepid visitors couldn't help but feel uneasy about the place. But fear didn't stop everyone, and while the stories surrounding Houska may have been scary, they also made it a very desirable residence. Built in the 13th century, the castle first served as the seat of a powerful noble family named Rosenbug. Then in 1471, it passed into the hands of the Burka family, whose last male heir died without producing any children. This meant that the castle was set to be inherited by King Wenceslas III. Now, Wenceslas loved his castle, but he didn't want to live there just yet. He had just gotten married and wanted to spend the first years of his marriage gallivanting around the kingdom. So he decided to leave the castle in the care of two servants until he and his bride returned from their travels. Now, these servants seemed like an unremarkable pair. They were simply two old men who had asked for work, and Wenceslas had hired them without a second thought. But unbeknownst to the king, they were actually skilled sorcerers who had come to Houska for a very specific purpose. Their plan was to get close to the royal heir and offer him up to Satan. When King Wenzel left, the two sorcerers took one look at the infant prince and knew they had a problem. Offering a fully grown man to the devil was one thing, but they'd never tried anything like this before. With a lack of precedence, they did the only thing they could and sent a raven to summon their master, the true leader of their coven, Satan himself. Meanwhile, young Prince Wenceslas had no idea he was the center of a satanic plot. He spent his days being cared for by wet nurses and his nights sleeping soundly in his crib. All the while, the two sorcerers watched over him, waiting patiently for the arrival of their Dark Lord. And then one day, the raven arrived. The sorcerers were overjoyed and immediately led Satan to the prince's room. There, in front of the helpless infant, they pledged their undying loyalty and offered him up as the ultimate sacrifice. Satan was pleased and promised to grant their deepest desires once the ritual was complete. As soon as the deal was struck, the sorcerers began chanting in unison. The room filled with smoke and fire, and suddenly Satan appeared in all his glory. He reached out a hand towards the baby and touched his forehead with a finger. In that instant, a surge of demonic energy coursed through the little boy's body. The sorcerers screamed with delight. Their plan had worked, and they had brought the Antichrist into the world. Now, they didn't know it at the time, but Satan had had enough of human shenanigans and was in no mood for playing house. When he possessed the child, he infused him with all the power and knowledge he had accumulated over the centuries. Then, much to the sorcerer's dismay, he left, confident that the prince would take care of things from there. Unfortunately, the little boy had no such confidence. As soon as Satan was gone, he burst into tears and refused to stop crying until his mother came to comfort him. Now, Queen Joanna was a good mother, but she had no idea what had happened to her son. She assumed that the change in his behavior was due to colic and spent the next few weeks trying to soothe him back to sleep. All the while, the two sorcerers watched anxiously from the sidelines. They had failed to bring about the reign of the Antichrist, and now Satan would be very angry, but then something miraculous happened. After several long weeks, the prince stopped crying and began acting like his old self again. Relief washed over Queen Joanna, but the sorcerers knew that this was only temporary. Satan would return, and when he did, things would get real ugly. Sure enough, as soon as the prince was old enough to walk, the full weight of Satan's power came crashing down on him. He began exhibiting disturbing behavior, including fits of rage, uncontrollable laughter, and even speaking in tongues. At first, Queen Joanna dismissed it as childish whimsy, but the sorcerers saw it as a sign that the devil was slowly taking over. They begged the queen to let them perform an exorcism, but she refused until it was too late. One day, the prince was seized by a fit of demonic possession and ran out of the castle. The sorcerers followed close behind, hoping to catch him before he did something terrible. They found him standing on a nearby hill, arms outstretched as if trying to embrace the whole world. And when they approached him, they realized that Satan had finally taken full control. With a flash of red light and a burst of sulphurous smoke, the prince was gone, replaced by a monstrous creature with leathery wings, sharp claws, and a face that was all teeth and eyes. The sorcerers screamed in terror as the demon spread its wings and let out a deafening roar. It had come for them. You see, ever since the fall of man, Satan had been searching for a way to regain his former glory. He'd tried tempting Jesus Christ, raising armies of hell, and even corrupting humanity's best and brightest. But none of those plans had worked, and now he was faced with another failure. The thing is, he wasn't just any demon. He was the most powerful one in existence. And as such, he had a name that struck fear into the hearts of even the bravest souls. His name was Lucifer, and when he looked upon his current form, he couldn't help but feel a sense of shame. How had he, the bringer of light, become trapped in this grotesque shell? The answer was simple, but painful. He'd fallen from grace, and the only way to get back what he'd lost was to reclaim his birthright as ruler of the underworld. But he couldn't do that while tethered to this pathetic excuse for a body. So with a snarl, he launched himself into the sky, leaving the cowering sorcerers in his dust. Now, at first, they were relieved to be rid of him, but that relief didn't last long. As soon as Lucifer was out of sight, a terrible plague swept through the land, killing hundreds every day. People emerged from their homes to find their crops withering in the fields, their animals dying in their stables, and their loved ones cold in their beds. It was as if Satan himself was waging war on humanity, and he was just getting started. Soon, entire villages were being wiped out, and the survivors fled to the nearest church for sanctuary. But even there, they weren't safe. Lucifer had somehow managed to possess the clergy, turning priests into prophets of the damned and bishops into heralds of the apocalypse. All hope seemed lost until a brave knight named Martin came forward to lead the fight against the forces of darkness. He assembled an army of the righteous and charged them with the task of destroying Lucifer once and for all. And so the battle lines were drawn, good versus evil, heaven versus hell, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. Will Martin and his army prevail and save the world from Lucifer's tyranny? And if you liked the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more. This was James, and you've been watching your channel, Valley of Knowledge. Stay curious, and see you in the next one.